My name's Quick Pick Nick, and here's your locks and lotteries for the Week 11 main slate on both FanDuel and DraftKings this November 21st. Subscribe to keep up with more full lineup, single game slates, and more sports betting content. At quarterback, most of my projections lined up pretty evenly with the prices on FanDuel and DraftKings, so there wasn't much of an opportunity to take advantage of any price discrepancies here. The best lock I could find today is Dak Prescott, more valuable on DraftKings than FanDuel given his relatively lower cost, but he's still looking like the best and most reliable option here. Averaging over 22 fantasy points per game, Prescott ranks top 5 in passing yards and touchdowns per game, facing a Kansas City defense that ranks bottom 10 in both categories. Other lottery quarterbacks include Kyler Murray, who's more valuable on FanDuel this time with the way prices shake out, and has a similar circumstance to Dak Prescott, ranking in the top 5 in passing yards and touchdowns, facing a bottom 10 pass defense, and Tua Tagovailoa if you need the extra budget, scoring above 22 fantasy points twice over the past 4 weeks, and facing the Jets' second to last defense in allowed pass yards. At running back, the best lock I could find was Nick Chubb, who's still not cheap, but well worth his cost, scoring around 30 fantasy points last week against Cincinnati, and this week facing the Lions' bottom 3 rush defense. Some other lottery backs my model found were Joe Mixon, who was almost our lock this week with similar value to Chubb, having scored 23 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. James Robinson scoring above 16 fantasy points in 5 of his past 6 contests with a good matchup against San Francisco's poor rush defense, and Michael Carter, the cheapest of the bunch, with 16 fantasy points last week against Buffalo, this week having an easier time against Miami. A few other backs worth mentioning are Christian McCaffrey, who might be all the way back, in which case his high cost is worth it if possible, and both Mark Ingram and A.J. Dillon, who will have expanded roles in their respective offenses with their number 1 running backs both sidelined this week. At receiver, the most promising lock my simulations found was Deebo Samuel, ranking 2nd in receiving yards across the NFL, facing a Jacksonville defense that ranks 25th in allowed receiving yards. He's not the most expensive either, costing around $1,000 less than the top option, making for solid value here. The long list of lotteries includes CeeDee Lamb linking up with Dak Prescott against Kansas City as the Cowboys' top receiver, Corey Davis, who's really cheap as the Jets' primary receiving threat, Jamar Chase making his case for Offensive Rookie of the Year as a top 5 receiver with respect to total yards and yards per game, Brandon Cooks, one of the only bright spots remaining on the Texans and getting synced up with a somewhat better quarterback of Tyrod Taylor, Emmanuel Sanders or Cole Beasley, since either would be very cheap for a number 2 option on a great team. It's just a question of who's actually Buffalo's second option behind Diggs, which is a question I can't answer right now. Hunter Renfrow taking over primary receiving responsibilities in Vegas and doing well with those responsibilities, including at least 14 fantasy points 2 weeks in a row, and RASHOD Bateman acting as the number 1 receiver this week for the Ravens in the absence of Marquise Brown. At tight end, there isn't so much of a lock as there are several lottery picks. These lotteries include George Kittle having a solid couple of weeks returning from injury, Darren Waller also stepping up in Las Vegas with the 5th most receiving yards among tight ends this season, Mike Gesicki with his great matchup against the New York Jets and 4th most receiving yards among tight ends, and Zach Ertz with his new role in Arizona facing Seattle's poorest secondary. At flex, there's a bunch of picks I've already shown you, and for defense, try to get as cheap as possible while still hoping for at least a few points. And with that, here are my full lineups for both FanDuel and DraftKings. If you want to change out your defense, you should probably spend at least $3,400 on FanDuel to get either Jacksonville or Minnesota at a minimum, or at least $2,300 on DraftKings to get either of those teams or the Jets. If you like this kind of fast-paced sports betting content, subscribe and comment and whatever, and thanks for watching.